And the fat tire enables it to go through the sand and mud, yeah, very easily. So it's a great bike to explore, trails, to go off trail and go through the forest, where there is no trail, and go around mud pits and exploring. So I kind of like to explore, but it's street legal, so I can ride it there. I can legally ride it most places in the Pine Barrens. So that's what I do in the wintertime, because it's cold out and I don't want to be sitting at 70 miles an hour wind blast when it's 40 degrees or below. So when you're going 10 to 30 miles an hour on the tight trails, it's much more comfortable. So, and I'm very lucky to have the woods like really close by. And I've got the Harley for two up with the wife when she occasionally wants to go riding when her back is up to it. And I'm thinking about getting another monkey bike. Honda has a monkey 125, real little thing. I think it's 200 pounds. It's got little 12-inch wheels and big fat tires. It's just it's a riot, I'll tell you. It's more fun than the barrel monkeys. It's silly fun. And you don't go really fast. It tops out at about 60. And it's, back roads, and you can have a lot of fun in a very local fashion. It gets probably 120, 150 miles a gallon. It's fuel injected, push the button, and it's a lot of fun. So I'm going to get probably another one of those at some point. CB. I work with a guy, and he got a CB 350 from a recommendation, a used bike from me. He didn't know much about it. He wanted to learn to ride, and he got a 350, and I played around with that and rode that when he wasn't riding it. Sometimes he kept it in my garage. And the SX 650, I think you're saying that was a very popular bike, and sort of like a Japanese Triumph, without most of the problems. And I wonder if you had an IT 175. I had one of those Yamaha, it's a two-stroke enduro bike. I don't believe it was street legal. Or the race bike, and I know that like every time I went out, the brakes would be gone, or the steering stem bearings would go, or the reed valve would get sucked in, or it needed a bore job, and then it needed crank bearings, and then the wheel bearings would go, and then it needed a chain, and then the brakes were worn out again. It was like, it's a performance machine, and meant to be basically, I guess, rebuilt after a race. But I wonder if that's the one you had, or if it was just like a DT75. I remember when they used to make all those different sizes. 90, 100, well, they made a 50, a 90, a 100, a 125, a 175, a 185, a 200, 250, a 350, 450s. They made a lot of different sizes, and they don't do that anymore. So we'll see how things are holding up. WA3 VJB in Annapolis from N2DTS, now with screen modulation.
Yeah, your signal continued to build, actually. N2DTS, WA3 VJB. Yeah, this was the mid to late 70s, so whatever Yamaha's prevailing model lineup was, this was a standard dirt bike. I don't think it had any special performance qualifications to it at all. I remember the little one, and these both belonged to neighborhood kids. One guy who had the bigger motorcycle, I thought was a 175. He was my age, and then his little brother had the Yamaha 125. And I was a little big for it. I mean, I was closing in on 6 foot tall back then, and the bike frame itself was pretty small. So if Brian was home, I would prefer to borrow his bike and go out in the woods instead of his little brother's. But hey, you know, I didn't have either of them, so I was lucky for whichever one I could get a hold of. And yeah, I remember the model lineup did seem to be large. I think even earlier, when I was a 10th grader, one of the shop teachers had a Triumph 650 that he used to park in an undisclosed area out and back by the shop. It wasn't really a parking space, but he could kind of keep an eye on it there. And of course, we kids knew he was keeping it there, and it was kind of cool because it was a good-looking bike. And I don't know, I never saw too many of them around in those days, so I was fascinated by what I thought was, I guess it was carburetors in those days. And the 650 was probably a 2-cylinder, because I remember how exotic it was when Honda came out with the 350 4-cylinder. And the only time I saw one of those was in the 10th grade, too. There was a guy, lived in a different neighborhood, but we were friends. He picked it up on government auction surplus from the government of Bermuda. And it was a former police motorcycle in Bermuda. And it was a 4-cylinder Honda 350, which at the time was apparently pretty exotic. I guess each cylinder wasn't much bigger than, you know, the knob on a transmitter if the whole displacement was 350. But anyway, that was a cool bike. It had a crash bar on it. It was factory painted white. The tank was factory painted white. It had an additional set of lights on it, not police lights, but illuminating lights on the crash bar. And it was just a good-looking bike. I never got to ride it, but he had just gotten it, and he was fixing it up. And, I guess for a while I must have been enamored of motorcycles because all this detail is coming back to me now, and I haven't thought of it for years. But no, I didn't particularly... I was too... I had to spend a lot of energy watching out for everybody on the road with that 650 when I was coming back from the Dayton Hamvention. And I said, this must be the way of life for a street bike rider. You got to do this all the time for a sense of self-preservation. And I said, nah, out in the woods, you don't have that problem. All you got to worry about is the terrain beneath your wheels and any trees that pop up in front of you up ahead. So that's, in a nutshell. I just walked over to the refrigerator during your transmission to fetch myself up a black chocolate stout. This happens to be made by Brooklyn Brewery. It's a limited release, and it's nice and cold. What is the APF on this? Oh, wait, I don't know that you're into brews like this. I was talking with somebody who very much understood all the parameters involved in craft brewing. I don't think that's you, come to think of it. So never mind. I'll just tip this up and enjoy it. N2DTS WA3VJB.
Oh, last comment. Yeah, my son would be into that. He's a sommelier, and now he's a wine salesman. He was a manager, worked his way up to a manager of a very high-end restaurant over in Philadelphia. But when we had the granddaughter arrive, they kind of wanted to scale it back a little bit to spend some time with her. So that actually sounds disgusting to me. Sorry, but I mean, I like chocolate, and I might like stout. I might, but I'm more of a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, Yangling Lager, that kind of, just a lager kind of guy. But we'll do comment. Hello, Mr. Comment. Your comments, please.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. It's Logan, K3RD. I just was going to ask Paul about that beer he's discussing, the stout. It probably has about the same color and consistency as a Guinness. Does it taste anything remotely like it, or is it a little bit different?
KA3EID, very good afternoon to you from WA3VJB with the group. No, I'm an authority on Guinness because we have a brewery here from the Guinness factory in the suburb of Baltimore known as Arbutus, and we were there for my birthday.